On behalf of the Division of Academics and our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Michael Robinson, I'm Justin Robichaux, and today we are going to walk through lesson planning and what resources we should be using in the math classroom. As we begin, let's familiarize ourselves with the components of today's presentation and our course of action. Today's goal is to show how teachers and administrators can improve instruction through effective planning. We'll do this by discussing how we start the planning process, what resources we should be using when we plan, and how to effectively execute the plan. On the right-hand side of this slide, you will see the bit.ly to gain access to this presentation, which is bit.ly/EBR Math Planning. Also, we have the QR code to the presentation to this presentation as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Keeping in line with our theme for this year, nothing is impossible, we know that effective planning across our district will help increase our math performance during the 2022-2023 school year. This year, our instructional focus is taking a three-pronged approach, using the EBR strategic plan, the coherence framework, and our superintendent's cradle to career keys to success as a compass. The Division of Academics will work with administrators and teachers on planning, implementation, and assessing and adjusting. In math, our focus for this school year is to work on implementing consistent reasoning and problem solving skills throughout our district. In the opening part of this conversation, we will discuss where teachers and administrators should go to start the planning process. For the math lesson plans this year, the easiest way to get your hands on the most current plans for your grade level will be to go to the EBR resources page found at bit.ly/EBR Math Resources. Now that we're at that page and you're on the site, you will see that in the top column, you will have the 2022-2023 lesson plans. Let's go ahead and click on those. Clicking on this link will send you to our weekly lesson plans. On the left-hand side, you can scroll between the multiple weeks that we have at your disposal. For the purpose of today, we will go over a 5th grade lesson for the week of October 3rd through October 7th. I'm now on the October 3rd through 7th slide deck. If you click on 5th grade, you see that it will open up the plan for our 5th grade class that week. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so we can see it a little bit better. All right, there we go. All right, so now that we're in the lesson plan, let's just break down the layout of the plan and what's available to you. In the top left-hand side, teachers and administrators are provided the materials needed for the week, the standards addressed, guiding focus for the week, the current module, and the anticipated end date of the current module. In the top right-hand corner of the plan, we have all of our EBR and LDOE math resources. These are all the items teachers need to be effective in the math classroom. Below the math resources, we get into the daily schedule for elementary and the AB schedule for secondary campuses. In this area, you will see the links to the daily annotated lessons. During the course of this week, 5th grade teachers will be teaching Module 2, Lessons 21, 22, 23, 24, and 26. For the purposes of today's presentation on planning, we will focus on 2 planning resources: the LDOE Guide to Implementing Eureka and the EBR Standards at a Glance. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my EBR resources page, click on the Guide to Implementing Tier 1. For 5th grade, I will click on 5th grade. And now I'm at our first planning part, which is looking at the Louisiana Guide to Implementing Eureka. In this document, we will look at the key features of this resource. First, it gives us an overview of the year and the pacing our district follows. Second, as we dig further into the tool, we will see one of the other key features. We will begin to see each lesson of Eureka broken down by module and lesson as well as the content standard that is being addressed in the lesson. So as we said earlier, we are going to focus on 5th grade, Module 2, Lesson 26. Let's make this a little bit bigger for everybody to see. So again, here we have in this first column, the lesson, then the standard. For today, we're looking at, again, Module 2, Lesson 26. So let's scroll down. Here we go right here, first row of the page. Here we see that this lesson focuses on 5.nbt.b.7. In addition, on the right-hand side, we also see the action is O. In this column, there will be 3 designations. An O represents an on-grade level lesson, an E represents an enrichment lesson, and an R recognizes a remediation lesson. Our pacing calendar only has on-grade level lessons. Again, on the far right-hand side of this, you will also see notes and rationale for the action that is described as it being an on-grade level lesson. Now that we have our standard, which again is 5.nbt.7, we will now go to our standards at a glance document. We'll go back to our bit.ly, EBR Math Resources, and we'll click on our standards at a glance. These 2 documents, the standards at a glance and the guide to implementing Tier 1, should always be readily available when you are making your plans. So now that I'm at my standards at a glance homepage, I'll click on 5th grade. What this does opens up a portal to all of our standards in our curriculum. Because again, we're focusing on 5.nbt.7, that's where I'll take my focus to. Our standards at a glance document provides clarity onto our state standards and allows us to look deep into the companion document and the achievement level descriptor for each standard. Both of these are vitally important when planning. As we did before, let's try to make this a little bit bigger just so the audience at home can see. All right, so as you see here, the first thing we get to is our companion document. This was taken from LDOE to make it a very easy document to use for our teachers and shows what would be found in the companion document for this standard. Here, we will see the identification of what the standard is addressing. On the left-hand side, you will see that it spells out that 5.nbt.7 means that students and teachers should be able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide decimals to hundredths using concrete models or drawings and strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and or the relationship between addition and subtraction. Then relate the strategy to a written method and explain the reasoning used. One of the main reasons I ask people to go to the companion document when planning is because it gives teachers examples to what kinds of problems students could see or interact with for this standard. On the top part of the companion document for this standard, we also see the component of rigor that should be addressed and remediation standards that could be needed for the student to be successful, as well as the 5th grade standard that can be taught in advance or taught concurrently with 5.nbt.7. This really is an excellent document to make sure that you are addressing all the concerns found within each standard. You also have tons of examples and notes for these standards. For NBT7, the standard requires students to extend the models and strategies they developed for whole numbers in grades 1 through 4 to decimal values. Before students are asked to give exact answers, they should estimate answers based on their understanding of operations. As you can see, this goes on for a few pages where we have multiple examples and multiple descriptions as to what students should be doing. Now again, this shows how standards should be addressed. As we scroll to the bottom of this standards at a glance document, you will also see that we have placed the achievement level descriptors. Here, we find what students need to be able to show in order to attain each achievement level as described by our state assessments. This identifies the level of work needed by students to perform at the approaching basic, mastery, and advanced levels on the LEAP assessment. As you can see, it takes the standard here, 5.nbt.7. It breaks it into the addition and subtraction component and the multiplication and division. As any normal rubric, you will see that it starts off with the level 2 approaching basic of what students need to be to have approaching basic level success and works its way up to what teachers should be seeing in advanced and mastery level work from students. Now that we are armed with what the state is looking for through the companion document and the achievement level descriptors, let's jump back into today's lesson, which again is Module 2, Lesson 26, so we can see how we're going to incorporate all of these entities. So the easiest way to do it again is to go back to your lesson plan and open up the lesson for today, which again is going to be Module 2, Lesson 26 for 5th grade. This takes us into the Eureka lesson and the annotated notes provided by our department. Again, one of the keys to making sure that we're looking at this document is that we're not just teaching the student edition. Inside of this plan, we will see 1,000 different ways and 1,000 different notes that teachers and students need to be successful on today's lesson. As we enter the teacher notes for this lesson, we immediately at the top see the objective. Today's objective is to divide decimal dividends by two-digit divisors, estimating quotients, reasoning about the placement of the decimal point, and making connections to a written method. Another key area to look at before planning for this lesson is to scroll and find the exit ticket at the very bottom of the document. Looking at the exit ticket first will allow us to backwards plan and identify the success indicator for today's lesson. So I'm scrolling to where the exit ticket will be found. This is just a description of said exit ticket. As you go through the notes, you will see that we then get into the student workbook component. So this is what the students see in their student facing workbook, the problem set, and then our exit ticket. So on this page, we will see what students need to be successful in today's lesson. Again, you will see that there are two questions for this exit ticket. There are two problems where students must divide using the standard algorithm and then check. And then question 2 is asking students that what we learned today, that division expressions have the same quotient and remainders are not necessarily equal to each other, that students must explain how this is possible. So now I know what the end is for this lesson. We will then begin to make sure that as we go through today's lesson, we are preparing students for that exit ticket. So let's go ahead and scroll back to the top and pick up where we were before. Let's do it this way, it might be a little easier. Now that we're going to stay in this document for a few seconds, I'm going to make it look a little bigger just so we can have a nice set of eyes on it. There we go. And let's focus here. Okay, so underneath the objective, we have the suggested lesson structure, which shows time allotments for each component of today's lesson. As you see, the anticipated time for today's lesson is 60 minutes. Most of our math blocks at this grade level should have a 90-minute math block, meaning we have this 60 minutes of whole group, and then we will have an opportunity for 30 minutes of small group. So let's dive into the meat and potatoes of the lesson and what we should be reviewing. First, our Eureka lesson begins with fluency practice, which is identified within the 5E model as our engage. For today's lesson, we've identified two fluency components for teachers and students to complete. We see we're renaming tenths and hundredths and estimating the quotient. The reason behind that is we wanted to take the 12-minute fluency and turn it only into an 8-minute fluency. This allows us the ability to get in our EBR bell ringers prior to today's lesson. We should spend a total of 8 minutes on these two components. First, we will rename tenths and hundredths, and second, we will estimate the quotient. Sticking to the time allocation allows us to complete the lesson in adequate time and make sure we are getting into our small groups. Also, since we had 3 provided to us and we are selecting only 2, consider using the fluency activities that prepare students for the concept development. Each of these fluency activities utilizes personal whiteboards, which you see here under the Materials tab of the fluency activity. Please keep in mind that we should be mindful of the time and make sure we stick to our 4 minutes per fluency activity for today's lesson. Every day has different times, so make sure that you're really focusing on what the times are for that day. Also, on the right hand side, we want you to make sure that you pay attention to the notes on multiple means of representation. These notes are very valuable to provide insight on student representations and fluency. So as you get through rename tenths and hundredths, you have your materials here, then you have a note to let you know that this fluency is preparing students for, and then it gives teachers directions as to what to say. We are not doing the divide decimals by multiples of 10, so we'll skip through that. We would be doing the estimate the quotient, and again, it says the materials are personal whiteboard, and then it tells the teacher and the student exactly what should be said during this component. Today is lesson 26. The note for this component of fluency says that the activity reviews yesterday or lesson 25's content. All right, so as we now get past the fluency, again, that should have taken us right around 8 minutes. We get to the heart of each Eureka lesson at the elementary level, and that is the concept development. Now, we are showing you obviously an elementary lesson plan. This same process and procedure could be happening, it should be happening for all of our secondary classes. So all of the elements that I'm showing you as far as the standards at a glance, the companion document, and the guide to implementing Eureka, all of those assets and resources should be used at the secondary level of planning as well. But as you can see, now that we're diving into the concept development, this has a time of 31 minutes. And also the other caveat is that this is occurring before the application problem, which is out of the norm for elementary. Once we start off, again, as we did before, you can see what materials are needed. So again, personal whiteboards. We've seen a lot of teachers that just use regular pieces of paper if they don't have any whiteboards at their disposal, or they'll put them in paper protectors. That way students can write on the paper protectors and then quickly erase. Again, this will show you that there are two problems for this first component of the concept development, and we'll really just walk through this first little part to make sure that everybody has a firm understanding of what's expected. As you can see, like we did with the fluency, there is a note attached to this. The note is for teacher preparation and says that in preparation for this set, teachers should have the algorithm for both problems completed beforehand, but solved only to the point of the solution being 28 with a remainder of 8 ones. On the right-hand side, it gives you exactly what should be done. So again, they're giving you explicit examples of what should be seen. And I think maybe the most valuable thing, again, is for teachers to walk through this process before teaching it to students. You can see here that we, again, as we did with the fluency, see our teacher and student actions and words. Make sure we're reading through these. It gives excellent prompts, questions, and it allows for multiple opportunities for students to have engagement and discourse throughout the lesson. We'll skip around highlighting some of the key parts. Key part number one, as I see right here, it says allow time for students to solve. This is showing that it is very student centered, that we are allowing students to think through and solve these problems. It's telling you what problems to write down, and then it's also saying, come on, we have 31 minutes. Let's make sure we allow time for students to solve. As we scroll through, another thing we really wanted to highlight is opportunities for student discourse. Here, as we get to this section, it says because the quotients and remainders are the same, does that necessarily mean the two-digit expressions are equivalent? A great higher level question. It also says here, turn and talk. So it is building in that student discourse at this explicit opportunity. On the right-hand side, again, as you see, exact student examples of what teachers should be pushing their students for. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to the next section we really want to highlight. As we get to the next section, we really want to make sure that we're paying attention to the language with students. Here, we see that let's use the same process, the word process. Here, decompose. These are specific vocabulary we want our students to be using during the course of this lesson. At the bottom, we can see adjust. Again, All of these components are, if we're reading through this and we're identifying key concepts, then we know what we should be hearing from students and what we should be articulating. I'm going to scroll back up to the top because I wanted to make sure that I noticed also over here, whenever we see these notes on multiple means of representation, this is very, very, very big for our teachers to make sure you read through. Again, I'm going to highlight just key focal points to make sure you identify that for this lesson, yes, there are certain strategies, but these things come up in all of the lessons found within Eureka. So at the very bottom of this one, it says, please see lesson 21 for alternate methods of recording the extra group. Again, this is giving you ideas, if needed, for alternative methods that students can be using in the classroom. If we are not going through our teacher notes and we are just looking at the student workbooks, we are missing out on a lot of these opportunities to differentiate instruction and allow for engagement and discourse. So as you can see, this was almost 3 pages of teacher notes just for those first 2 problems. And again, as we see on the top of page 350, teacher action. Talk to your neighbor about what you notice about the quotients of problems 1 and 2. Again, another opportunity to really infuse high levels of engagement and high levels of student discourse. So we just reviewed kind of components of problems 1 and 2. We'll stop there. We don't want to go into problem 3 because we don't want it to get too long-winded. But I think you get the gist of the opportunities that the teacher and student actions found within that concept development really provide teachers and students. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and just skip to the bottom where we get into our application problem. Here we go. So the application problem takes on the E-Explore in the 5E model. This area provides another opportunity for students to explore the idea that whole numbers with remainder quotients with the same digits are not necessarily equivalent. So again, you have teacher actions, you have notes, you have on the right-hand side examples of what we should be seeing in the classroom. Following the application problem is the problem set for the day. This is our elaborate stage. Students and teachers should stick again with the timing of 10 minutes that you see here. And then teachers, within that 10 minutes, you can specify the individual problems that you want your students to complete. Please do not feel that if there's 10 problems for the problem set, that you have to do all 10 problems. The best thing to do is to make sure that you stick within that 10 minutes. And then if you would like to do the rest of them, as you can see on the annotations here, it can be done in small group. It can be done at other parts of the day. It can be done at a small table with the teacher for a select few students. So here we've identified which problem set numbers we should be doing for this activity. But again, for the teacher's perspective, you would have a better read. These are examples of what could be done. Again, within the 10 minutes and within that allotted time, make sure that you modify the assignment and specify which problems students should work on first. And as we said, as our focus was for this year, the RDW model will really help us with our problem solving skills. And it articulates that as well, saying students should solve these problems using the RDW approach used for application problems as well. Following the application problem, we have dived into that problem set. And again, that is a 10-minute opportunity. And then we start getting into a fantastic component, which is the student debrief. This is often skipped. And unfortunately, by skipping this, we miss out on a lot of excellent opportunities for teachers and students to dive into deep conversation and reflection on today's lesson. So again, it reiterates the lesson objective. Student debrief is intended to invite reflection and active processing of the total lesson experience. I can't harp on this section enough. Sometimes as educators, we get into the habit of thinking that the conversational piece can go away in lieu of doing more problems. But for some of these questions that you'll see within the student debrief, it opens up opportunities for excellent engagement and deep understanding of what was just done. So let's just take a look at a few of the questions so you can see what I'm saying, because this section has a variety of questions available to you and is a fantastic way to incorporate high levels of DOK into your lesson. So looking at this first question, explain how you could prove whether two division expressions with the same whole number quotients and remainders are equivalent. Another opportunity below says turn to a partner and compare your work And thinking of problem 1B, take the necessary time here for students to compare approaches. So there we have opportunities for students to turn and talk, and it gives you explicitly what to do. And these are not lower levels of DOK, these are higher levels of DOK that it's asking. How does your knowledge of multiplication facts help you find a reasonable estimate? On the first day of implementation, you may find that some of these questions go above your students' heads, but the big thing is to consistently use this student discourse to make sure that they start seeing questions like this on a daily basis. And then, as we do with all Eureka lessons, we end on the exit ticket. Remember that we looked at the exit ticket earlier as we were intentional with our backwards design model. So hopefully we've hit on all those components of the fluency, concept development, and the problem set to show success on today's exit ticket. As I scroll through, I see that that is the end of our teacher notes, and we get into the student workbook pages. So again, these are the student-facing products that the students see. All the other things that we had just referenced are the things that teachers should only see. So we have ideas of what the problem set would be for that day. And remember, that's what we identified. These problems are 10 minutes long, and we told exactly which ones we want to do. And then you've got your exit ticket. So in review, we kind of discussed our three-pronged approach to planning. For part one, we said, hey, where do you start the planning process? And that is through our lesson plan template and our annotated plans, which are found in our bit.ly EBR math resources. For part two, we talked about what resources should you use when planning. Here, mentioned the guide to implementing tier one, mentioned EBR standards at a glance, which again had companion document and achievement level descriptors within it. And then we also talked through our math lesson plans. All three of these are hyperlinked, so you can get back to them if needed. And then in section 3, we wrapped it all up by saying, how do we effectively plan for the lesson in the classroom? Again, our keys to this, or we do this by making sure we have read through the annotated lesson, paying close attention to the notes section of the plan. And then the last thing we really wanted to make sure, because this is one of the kickbacks we always get with Eureka, is that there's no flexibility. Teachers do have flexibility to make appropriate changes that address concerns in the classroom. We don't want you just to take the lesson and feel like you have to do every single thing from point A to point Z. There are opportunities within each Eureka lesson to make the appropriate changes to address the concerns that you have inside of your classroom to make the plans your own. Well, I hope this lesson plan overview really showed how we can improve instruction through effective planning during this school year. If you need anything from the math department, please don't hesitate to reach out. On the left-hand side, you see our emails, Justin Robichaud, math supervisor, and then our content trainers, Miss Knighton at the elementary level, Miss Roberts at the middle school level, and Miss Cage at the high school level. So as always, thanks for everything you do to make EBR a great place to learn and work, and have a great day.